The House on Marrow Lane. Chapter 1. Introduction. I bought the house because it was cheap, and I should have known that a house that cheap in a town like Eldridge Hollow wasn't cheap by accident. My name is Sarah Voss. I was 34, freshly divorced, and tired of feeling like a guest in my own life. The Marrow Lane house sat at the end of a gravel road, half swallowed by oak trees that hadn't been trimmed in a decade. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, water-stained wallpaper in the shape of continents nobody could name. The realtor, a nervous man named Dale, who kept touching his collar, told me it had good bones. He didn't mention that it had been empty for 11 years. I moved in on a Tuesday in October, back when the leaves were doing that slow burn from green to rust, and the air smelled like wood smoke even when nobody was burning anything. I remember standing in the front hallway with boxes stacked to my knees, sunlight slanting through the transom window, and thinking, this is mine now. Just me. No more tiptoeing around somebody else's moods. No more apologizing for existing too loudly. The first few nights were fine. Better than fine. I slept in a house that didn't argue back. It was the 4th night when I noticed the temperature thing. I'd turned the thermostat to 68 before bed, same as always, and woke up at some ungodly hour with my breath fogging in front of my face like I was standing in a walk-in freezer. I checked the thermostat. 68, it said, bright and smug in its little digital window. I checked again, in the morning, 68. The room was warm by then, ordinary, sunlight falling across the floorboards like nothing had happened. I told myself it was an old house settling into cold weather. Old houses do that. They breathe differently than new ones, hold on to drafts in corners you can't find. I'd read that somewhere, or maybe I just wanted to have read it. My sister Meg called that Friday. "How's the haunted mansion?" she asked, half joking, because I'd sent her a picture of the place, and she'd said it looked like something out of a movie where the babysitter dies first. "It's quiet," I told her. "Really quiet. I like it." "You always did like things too quiet," she said, and I remember laughing because it was true, and because I didn't yet understand that quiet is not the same thing as empty. There was a room at the end of the upstairs hall I hadn't opened yet. The door stuck, swollen from years of humidity, and I'd told myself I'd deal with it eventually, once I'd unpacked the kitchen, once I'd figured out which outlets worked. It wasn't avoidance. It really wasn't. I just had other things to do. But some nights, lying in bed with the house ticking and settling around me the way houses do, I'd swear I heard something from that end of the hall. Not footsteps, not exactly. More like the sound of someone shifting their weight from one foot to the other. Patient, waiting. I told myself it was the pipes. Chapter 2. Strange Events. The pipes theory held up for about 2 weeks. Then the photographs started moving. I'm not talking about anything dramatic. No floating frames. No shattering glass. Just small displacements. A photo of my mother that I kept on the mantle, always facing the room, would turn up facing the wall in the morning. I'd set it right, mutter something about drafts or an unlevel shelf, and go about my day. It happened again 3 nights later. Then, again, I started leaving a pencil mark on the mantle where the frame's edge sat, so I'd know for certain if it moved. It moved every single time. The frame ended up a ½ inch to the left of the mark, angled just slightly toward the wall, like something had picked it up, considered it, and set it down without quite caring where. I mentioned it to my neighbor, an older woman named Ruth Calloway, who lived 2 properties down and had lived in the hollow her whole life. She came over for coffee one afternoon, ostensibly to welcome me to the neighborhood, though I suspect she'd been waiting to see who'd finally buy the place. "You hear anything strange in there?" she asked, too casually, stirring sugar into her cup long after it had dissolved. "Like what?" "Just anything." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sounds, cold spots, that kind of thing." I told her about the picture frame, feeling a little foolish saying it out loud. Ruth's hand went still on the spoon. "That house sat empty a long time before you," she said. "People don't usually let a house that nice sit empty that long. Not around here. Land's not cheap enough for that. Why did it?" She looked toward the window instead of at me. "Ask Dale," she said. "He'll tell you what he wants you to know." She left not long after that, and I noticed she didn't finish her coffee. That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I sat in the living room after dark, no lights on, just to see. I don't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that the house was only a house. Walls and beams and old nails. Nothing more sinister than dust and settling wood. Around 11, I heard humming. It was faint, threading up from somewhere beneath the floor. A woman's voice, unhurried, almost tender, the kind of tune you'd hum to a child who wasn't ready to sleep yet. I sat frozen on the couch, with my heart slamming against my ribs, straining to place the melody, and couldn't. It wasn't a song I knew. It stopped the moment I stood up, cut off mid-phrase like someone had noticed me listening and gone quiet out of politeness or spite. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the lamp on, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house tick and groan around me, telling myself over and over that houses make noise. That's all this is. Houses make noise. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the light bulb in my lamp went out. Not flickered, went out, the way a bulb does when its filament finally snaps. I lay there in the sudden dark, breath caught somewhere behind my teeth, and I heard, very clearly, from the end of the hall, the sound of that stuck door creaking open. I didn't get up to check. I want to be honest about that. I lay there with my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep, pretending so hard my jaw ached from clenching, until the gray light of morning finally came through the curtains and I let myself breathe again. When I finally worked up the nerve to look, the door at the end of the hall stood open 3 inches, exactly enough for a person to have slipped a hand through and pulled. I didn't remember ever getting it unstuck. Chapter 3. Darkness grows. One should have left then. I know that now. Hindsight makes cowards of us all, but at the time, I told myself I was being rational, methodical, an adult dealing with an old house's quirks instead of running from shadows like a child. I finally opened the door all the way. It was a small room, smaller than I'd expected, with a single window facing the backyard and the oaks beyond it. No furniture except a child's bed frame, rusted at the joints, stripped of its mattress, wallpaper peeling in long strips, faded yellow with a pattern of little sailboats that might once have been cheerful. The air in there was different, colder, yes, but also thicker somehow, the way air feels in a room that hasn't been opened in a long time, holding on to something it doesn't want to give up. There was a name scratched into the windowsill low down, in the crude, uneven letters of a child's hand. Eli. I stood there a long time reading that name over and over, feeling something cold settle into my stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. I did some digging that week. The kind of digging you do at midnight with a laptop and a cup of coffee gone cold beside you. County records, old newspaper archives, the Hollow's tiny local historical society website that hadn't been updated since 2011. It took some hunting, but I found a name attached to the house, the Ashford family, who'd owned it from the 60s until the late 80s. A husband, a wife, and one son, Elias Ashford. Eli. There wasn't much else. A property transfer in 1989. No obituary I could find, no records of the family after that year, like they'd simply stopped existing in any paper trail I could access. I told myself maybe they'd moved, started over somewhere else, the way people do. I told myself that for about 3 more days, until the night the water in my bathtub ran red. Not blood red, rust-colored, the way old pipes sometimes run when they haven't been used in a while. That's what I told myself while I stood there, gripping the edge of the tub, watching it swirl down the drain in threads that looked, in the low light, unmistakably organic. I turned the water off and didn't bathe again for 3 days. I washed with bottled water and a washcloth like some kind of frontier woman, and I hated myself a little for how relieved that made me feel. The humming came back more often after that. Some nights from beneath the floor, some nights from inside the walls, and once, just once, from directly behind me while I stood at the kitchen sink, close enough that I felt breath against the back of my neck, warm and human, and utterly wrong, in a house that should have contained no one but me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the kitchen, ordinary in the dim evening light, the faucet dripping its slow metronome into a full sink. I called Meg that night and told her everything. The frame, the humming, the door, the name in the windowsill. I expected her to laugh, tell me I'd been reading too many ghost forums, watching too much late-night television. She didn't laugh. "Sarah," she said very quietly, "I think you should stay somewhere else for a while. I can't just abandon the house, Meg. I put everything into this. I don't care about the house." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I care about you." I told her I'd think about it. I didn't mean it. I was already too deep in, too determined to understand what this thing was, before I let it push me out of a home I'd paid for with money I didn't entirely have to spare. That was my mistake. I know that now. Curiosity is a kind of arrogance, and this house punished arrogance the way some men punish a debt. Chapter 4. Terror. The nights stopped being separate from each other. That's the only way I can describe it. They bled together into one long unbroken dread, the way fever dreams do, where you can't remember what happened when, only that it happened, and that it was bad. I started seeing him. The first time was in the hallway mirror, just past midnight, a small boy standing behind my reflection where no boy could possibly be standing, pale and thin, wearing something that might have been pajamas, decades out of fashion. He didn't move. He just watched me the way you'd watch a stranger through a window, curious and unafraid. I turned around so fast I cracked my elbow against the doorframe, and when I looked back at the mirror, there was nothing there but my own face, white as paper, eyes too wide. The second time was worse. I woke at some black hour of the night to the unmistakable weight of someone sitting on the edge of my bed. Not a shifting of the mattress from wind or settling. A weight, deliberate, patient, the way a person sits when they're waiting for you to wake up so they can finally say what they came to say. I lay rigid, too terrified to open my eyes, feeling the mattress dip and hold. Dip and hold. Someone's slow breathing audible now. Small and wet. A child's breathing. Close enough that I could have reached out and touched whatever it was. Please, I whispered, not even sure who I was asking. Please, just please. The weight lifted. The breathing stopped. I lay there until dawn, with my eyes shut and my hands fisted in the sheets. And I did not sleep, and I did not dream. And when the sun finally came up, I called in sick to work and sat on my porch until noon, just to feel the ordinary warmth of daylight on my face. Ruth Calloway found me there. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at me the way you look at someone who's finally understood something you'd been trying to warn them about. "You've seen him," she said. It wasn't a question. "Who is he, Ruth? Tell me, please." She sat down heavily on the porch step beside me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked old. Not just aged, but worn down, the way stone gets worn by decades of the same weather hitting it over and over. "I was 16 when the Ashfords lived there," she said. "Eli was 7. Sweet boy, quiet. His mother doted on him something fierce, but his father..." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "His father had a temper on him that the whole street knew about, even if nobody said so out loud back then. That was a different time. People minded their business. What happened to him?" Ruth was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she wouldn't answer. "Nobody rightly knows," she finally said. "The family just stopped being seen. All 3 of them. One week they were there, next week the house was empty and up for sale. And everybody in town had a theory, and nobody said any of them out loud. That's the honest truth, Sarah. I don't know what happened in that house. I only know that nobody who's lived there since has stayed longer than a year." I asked her how many people that was. 4 families, she said. "Before you, that night, I found the loose floorboard in the small room upstairs. I don't know what made me pry at it. Some instinct, maybe. Some pull I couldn't name. The same pull that had made me open that door in the first place." Beneath it was a small tin box, rusted at the seams, and inside the box was a child's drawing, folded so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. It showed a house, this house, unmistakably, with its wraparound porch and its oak trees, and 3 stick figures standing in front of it, 2 tall ones and 1 small one. The small one had been colored over entirely in black crayon, scribbled so hard in places that the paper had torn. Underneath, in the same crude child's hand as the windowsill, it said, "He put me where nobody looks." Chapter 5. The Truth. I didn't sleep after that. I sat at my kitchen table with the drawing in front of me and a flashlight in my hand, because somehow the dark had stopped feeling like something I could simply switch away with a light bulb. I went back to the Historical Society records the next morning, hollow-eyed and shaking on too much coffee, and this time I dug deeper, cross-referencing property surveys, old zoning permits, anything that might tell me something about the land itself rather than the family who'd lived on it. And I found it, buried in a 1976 permit application for a storm cellar addition that had apparently never been finished, never inspected, never so much as mentioned again in any record after that year. There was no storm cellar in my house. I would have known. I'd been in every room, every closet, every inch of the crawl space beneath the kitchen, except the small room, the child's room. I hadn't checked beneath that floor, beyond the 1 loose board. I went back up with a crowbar from the garage, hands shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to wedge it under the boards properly. Beneath the floor of Eli Ashford's room, beneath the joists, there was a gap, not a full cellar, just a crawl space maybe 3 feet deep, dug out and abandoned mid-project. The kind of half-finished thing a man might start in anger and never bother to complete once the anger had already gotten what it wanted. I found small bones down there. I want to be clear that I am not speculating about what I found. I found small, unmistakably human bones, curled in a shape too deliberate to be an accident of settling earth, tucked into a space too small and too hidden to be anything but purposeful. I called the police that night. I sat on my porch until they arrived, watching the house behind me like it might do something while my back was turned. And when the detectives finally came out, after hours of tape and flashlights and hushed, clinical conversation, one of them, a tired-looking man named Detective Reyes, sat down beside me on the steps. "We'll need dental records, but given the location, the age of the remains, and what you found in that box," he said carefully, "I think you already know whose bones those likely are." "His father did this," I said. It wasn't a question either. Not by then. Case file from '89 says, "The family reported the boy as a runaway," Reyes said. "Nobody looked very hard. Different time, like your neighbor probably told you. Nobody thought to look under his own bedroom floor." I asked him what happened to the father. "Records show he sold the house within the month and left the state," Reyes said. "Never resurfaced under that name again, near as anyone can tell. Whether that means anything," he shrugged, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "That's not really my department." I sat with that a long time after they left, the tape still fluttering yellow across my porch railing in the wind. The house behind me finally, terribly quiet, in a way that felt less like peace and more like held breath. Chapter 6. Final Nightmare. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought that once Eli was found, once someone finally looked where nobody had looked in 37 years, he could rest, and I could go back to sleeping in my own house without waiting for a weight to settle on the edge of my bed. I was wrong. The house went quiet for 11 days. No humming, no cold spots, no photograph turned toward the wall. I let myself believe it was over. I even slept in the small upstairs room one night, on a mattress dragged up from the guest room. Some instinct telling me that, if he was still there in any form, he shouldn't have to be alone in that space anymore. Not after everything. I woke at 3 in the morning to find the window open, cold air pouring in off the oaks outside, and Eli standing in the middle of the room, watching me with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Not curiosity, not sadness, something closer to relief. "Thank you," he said. His voice was small and clear, entirely ordinary. The voice of a boy who should have grown up and hadn't, for finding me. I couldn't speak. I lay there with my heart hammering and watched him. And for the first time since I'd moved into that house, I wasn't afraid, just heartbroken in a way I hadn't let myself be until that exact moment. "I'm so sorry," I finally managed. "Nobody should have done that to you." He tilted his head, the way children do when they're working up to something difficult. "He's still here too," Eli said. "He never left. He just stopped being seen, same as me." I sat up so fast the mattress springs shrieked in the silence. "What do you mean?" But Eli was already fading, the way morning fog does when the sun finally clears the tree line, thinning at the edges until there was nothing left of him but the cold air still pouring through the open window. I didn't understand what he meant until 3 nights later, when I woke to find the loose floorboard in that same room pried up again. Not by me. I want to be clear. I hadn't touched it since the police finished their work, and a second, smaller cavity exposed beneath the first one the initial search apparently hadn't gone deep enough to find. I didn't look inside it. I want to be honest about that too. I ran out of that house in my bare feet with my phone and my car keys and nothing else. And I did not go back. Not once. Not even to collect the things I'd left behind. The county eventually sent investigators back to finish what they'd started. I read about it in the local paper weeks later. A short article buried near the classifieds. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. They'd found a second set of remains beneath the first cavity. Adult, male, badly decomposed, cause of death, undetermined, given the state of decay. No identification possible without further testing. Nobody has ever confirmed whose remains those were. The article didn't speculate, and neither did the detective when I called him months later, unable to let it go the way I told myself I should. We don't have DNA to compare it against, Reyes told me, his voice carefully neutral in the way of a man who'd learned not to say more than the facts aloud. The father was never formally re-identified after he left the state in '89. For all official purposes, he simply doesn't exist anywhere in any record after that year. I asked him what he thought. There was a long pause on the line, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. I think, he finally said, that some houses don't let people leave as easily as they think they can. I sold the house within the year, at a loss, to a buyer I never met in person, through an agent who handled everything remotely because I couldn't bring myself to set foot on that gravel road again. I don't know who lives there now. I've thought about looking them up, warning them, telling them everything I know. I haven't done it. I tell myself it's because enough time has passed. Because whatever was in that house is finished with its business now, settled and done. But some nights, usually around 3 in the morning, I wake gasping in my new apartment 200 miles away, certain, absolutely certain, that I feel a small weight settling onto the edge of my bed, patient and waiting the way it always used to wait. I never open my eyes to check. I'm too afraid some nights that it won't be Eli sitting there this time.